So last week, we saw the release of Bridgerton Season 3 Part 2, and my good golly, we all had some thoughts, didn't we? And they weren't all exactly positive. I think there was a lot to like about Season 3, I'm not just hating on the whole thing, and I think I had a very positive outlook on the first half of the season. Hell, there were even parts of Part 2 that I very much liked. But in the end, I was feeling a bit whelmed, very whelmed indeed. When all was said and done, I just felt a bit, My major gripe was pollen, to be honest, but one of the big talking points that's come out of the release of the season wasn't even really related to them at all, and instead revolved around the B plot, as it were, the B romance. And we're talking about Francesca and John, although in my eyes, and to the level I was invested in them, the true B romance is Violet and Lady Danbury's brother, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, I guess we'd better lay the foundations, right? Francesca was freshly recast for this season, and embarked on her own romantic storyline, one that was very different to what we'd come to expect from Bridgerton. We came to expect over-the-top declarations of love, the yearning, the burning, smouldering looks, lingering touches, grand speeches, intimate dances, and a whole lot of steam, you know what I'm saying? But this was not the tale we saw play out on screen. Instead, we meet Francesca, and she's seemingly far more pragmatic about the whole thing than the rest of her family. It's kind of like Anthony from Season 2, or at least the first part. The decision has been made, she will marry and get settled. She's not interested in the whole grand, epic love story side of things. She wants to settle down with a kind man who won't mistreat her and get away from it all. She values her peace and quiet, an introvert. And so she eventually meets somebody who's going to be perfect for her. John Sterling, the Earl of Kilmartin, who is also a quiet person. He doesn't much like social interaction if he can avoid it. He can sit with her in silence. He listens to what she has to say. Remember when she ranted about how shit the music was in the street and he immediately runs off to have it rearranged based on what she said? And he just sits with her in silence. They don't need to talk to have that connection. And despite protests from her mother, who thinks that this is not how a love match should look, Francesca tries to make it clear that this is her version of the love match, that she's simply a different person from Violet and her siblings. She feels differently. She loves differently. And in a season that I thought was a bit on the weaker side at times in terms of writing, I was very compelled by this. I knew this guy was not the endgame storyline for her romance and that he dies, but I still thought it was very sweet. And it made it clear that a quiet love is just as valid as the grand, epic, sweeping love. Or so we thought! Because this is where the wheels fall off. She does not vibe when they kiss, then she meets his cousin Michaela, and she does all the things that Violet describes for a true love match. The same things that Violet does when she met Edmund, supposedly. She forgets her name, she stumbles over her words, etc, etc. And yeah, this whole Michael to Michaela change has well and truly rustled some jimmies. And whilst I wish I could tell you that there's no need to be upset, I don't think this has been handled all that well. And so now we get to dive into the good, the bad, and the ugly surrounding the whole situation and the way it was implemented, and how it might work going forward. Okay, before we go any further, I need to lay out some stakes here. I do not care that they've changed Michael into Michaela and turned it into a same-sex coupling. However, that being said, I do understand why people might be upset. After all, there's a lot of people that have either read the books previously, or they read the books after Season 1 released, and the fandom exploded. And thus, there are many that found Francesca and Michael, their story, as the most compelling romance of the siblings. The most interesting, the most beautiful. And yeah, I can get why people would be unwilling for the foundations of that storyline to be shifted, and for us to move away from that. I honestly think that on the face of it, this is a valid complaint to have about the direction of the story, and I don't think it makes you inherently bigoted or what have you. A lot of people have a very deep emotional attachment to the characters and to the world. Hell, even the showrunner has said as much. That she, a queer woman, saw a lot of herself in Francesca and her story, and hence why she felt it was the right choice to change things up. So, people have the right to be salty. That's fair. However, that being said, I also can't help but find some of the anger and complaints to be rather cringe. Like, yeah, complaints, that's fine.
Sorrows, prayers.
Talk about how you think it's a bad idea. Give evidence and whatnot to support your claims. But the people who are just going after the actress, being racist, sexist, homophobic, fuck off dickhead, do not do that. It's pathetic and sad. You're a cringe person. Accept it. And also the people who are making a change.org petition, what the hell's going on? It's embarrassing. It's like when people signed a petition to remake the final seasons of Game of Thrones the right way. Like the mega studios are going to reshoot everything. They've made their money. And the tide is not going to shift on this. Bridgerton is pulling in humongous viewership numbers. That's not changing anytime soon. The show would need to be truly bad for a very long time for it to truly crash and burn. I mean, look at Game of Thrones. It was terrible in the end. But a couple years later, and House of the Dragon's pulling in pretty big viewership numbers for HBO and Max, plus there's many who are sailing the high seas to watch it. And that was after the biggest TV flop in years, where after the final episode there was like a month of salt and then nobody wanted to ever acknowledge it again. If you can come back from that, then Bridgerton is secure in its place as the big dog of romance, at least for the next couple of years. Or probably next decade, if they start to do the deeply annoying thing and give us 2-year gaps between seasons. My god, why are they doing that? That's a whole different grievance that I have though. And yes, that's just my general thoughts on the controversy, but I still have opinions on the actual change and how it's going to impact the writing. And right now, I'm not exactly jumping for joy, because from the get-go, I think they really bungled how to go about this storyline. Just earlier, we talked through how Francesca's storyline seemed to be, at least this season, about quiet love, introverted love. And that's what she is. That's how she functions. That's what she's all about. Seemingly, at least. And that's great. That's good. It's good to see the writers can actually understand that there's all these different types of... Oh wait, no. No, they don't. They don't believe this is love at all. They've decided to backtrack on all of it in the final episode, where it's revealed that Francesca didn't feel their kiss. Pretty sure her face falls, so there's no zing, no spark, nothing of the sort. And then she meets Michaela, and her world changes. She has the spark, the zing, the stumbling over the words, forgetting her name. Exactly like Violet foretold. And on top of that, I'm pretty sure that the showrunner has openly said they're going to be exploring what Franny's marriage to John is lacking. Which to me, that implies she's not bi, she's gay. And thus her marriage to John is one that is out of friendship and duty, but not romantic love and passion, which kind of invalidates everything they've been doing in terms of their quiet love. It makes John's arc so much sadder in every single way. In that, I think they're probably going to write that he loves her, but it's not reciprocated, at least in the same way. So when he dies, it's just miserably sad, and nobody feels good about it. And that's as far as we've gotten so far in terms of development of their story. And to me, it's already shaky ground from the get-go. Surely it makes more sense to hold to the books more strongly and have Franny perhaps acknowledge that Michaela is attractive, etc., but have Michaela be the one that exhibits the behaviours with her described by Violet. That way we can see that this is the end game pairing, but that Francesca is not feeling it yet because she currently has her love match. People love pining, and having Michael pine in the books is apparently much of his story. He falls instantly, and he falls way harder. People eat that shit up, and he has to watch his cousin live out his fantasies, wishing it were him. And when John dies, and thus a vacancy opens up, so to speak, he can't handle it. And he runs away from it for years. Where does he go? He goes to like India or something? I've only skimmed the wiki, forgive me. And it creates this massive feeling of imposter syndrome. He has to live in his brother-in-all-but-name's home, walk in his shoes, to know that John and Francesca wanted children but couldn't have them, and so now he's the Earl, because with John dead, he was the heir. And on top of that, he's lusting after his widow too, which makes him feel like the worst sort of guy. This is compelling shit. And that's just with my summary of it, which is, based on skimming wiki articles because I'm too lazy to read the book. And that's one element of this story that feels like it should have been an easy one-to-one adaptation, whether it's Michael or Michaela, because it acknowledges that John and Franny had something real, whilst it also builds tension, drama, and makes Michaela a really deep, tortured, and interesting character. I'm truly baffled they didn't do this. Why didn't they use this home run of a narrative thread and weave it through next season and beyond? Surely that's the no-brainer. Instead, they're going to have both of them pining after the other while she's still married, which is just sad and awkward. And it makes you feel like shit for John because, well, he could have just married somebody else that would actually love him for him. And really, this is the main issue I have with the new direction of the story. It makes me feel like they wasted my time during season 3 for this romantic fake-out bullshit. Nobody likes to feel like their time's been wasted. If they're going to go in that direction with Fran pining, just have her and John meet and get married off screen because it no longer matters. It's no longer relevant. Pick up that story in the immediate aftermath of his death. Just like in the bloody book. I don't know, say that they met in Bath or some shit and they got married in the break between seasons when the families retired to the big country estates. That way you're not wasting my time and you could have dedicated the pretty significant amount of time they had with John and Fran to other characters and storylines that really needed it. On top of that, you don't piss off people in the droves when you imply that low-key love is no longer valid, it's not part of the story, and that all love has to be big and bombastic. And really, that's my main gripe that I have. And it makes me very annoyed as a viewer. I feel betrayed. My trust has been betrayed. Somebody add up the minutes that they had for their storyline. It's probably quite significant. But that being said, I think the story itself can still be salvaged, despite there being a number of pitfalls that they may run into. Okay, so for starters, I think they need to show that Fran does in fact love this dude in a romantic sense, and course correct the ending of season 3 somewhat, or They need to have him also not be feeling it. And there's this mutual realization that whilst they're not in love, they love each other. They're platonic life partners. I don't know, maybe you could make him ace or shit. I don't know, maybe he's gay. I don't know, I'm spitballing, I'm spiraling, I'm on copium. I just think it becomes majorly tragic, needlessly tragic, and on top of that, a major distraction if this guy loves the woman who lusts after his cousin and then falls for her after he's dead. In fact, based on the writing so far, she's going to fall for her during the course of their marriage. So when he dies, and then she has an intense, passionate, and true love with Michaela, it's always going to have that spectre hanging over it of, hey, I kind of feel bad for that John guy. Did they cheat on John? Emotional cheating, etc., etc. And it just feels like a major disservice to what would be the first LGBT love story of the main Bridgerton siblings. You know, outside of spin-offs and stuff. Yes, we have Benny Boy, but that was really a lust story. Remember, the dude was too horny, so he had to dump Lady What's-Her-Face. Because he can't commit to anybody right now. He just needs to keep experiencing. Jesus, Benny. So therefore, to avoid this negativity surrounding this romance, it just feels smart to make adjustments to his character. You want to avoid all that sort of talk. You want people to buy in more thoroughly. And I mean, surely it's not too late to make the pivot. If it's going to take 2 years to release this goddamn season, then surely the scripts aren't even written yet. Change it. Change it now. Make him gay or something. I don't know. Just make it less sad. It just feels like ridiculous self-sabotage. How many fucking love triangles do we need? So yeah, likely big time pining from either side next season. But we also run into a few more snags. One of which is the issue of children. From what I understand, a big part of Francesca's arc in the book is her desire to be a mother. She's somewhat left behind by her brothers and sisters in that regard. And so she wants to experience parenthood, but the problem is, she struggled with fertility, and she and John were never able to have a child before he died. Her desire to remarry is largely as a result of her wanting to have a kid, which in turn leads to Michael's return, because he needs a wife and an heir, and so romance begins to happen, right? Like I said, I haven't read the books, so somebody fill in the class in the comments. So obviously, that's not going to be happening this time, because, well, her end game is a woman, and homophobia is rife in this day and age. Even in Bridgerton, which is a more idealized version of everything, there's probably no chance of an open gay relationship or getting married or anything like that. But there does need to be an heir if John's going to cuck it, yeah? Because if there isn't, when he dies, the estate needs to pass on to a boy, because if you don't do that and have Michaela somehow inherit it all, does it not suddenly invalidate the whole storyline of the Featherington title? And the Mondriches with the Kent title, and also relegate those storylines to, well, that meant nothing and was a massive waste of time. And I mean, I already feel like that for the Mondrian storyline, if we're being brutally honest. So you have to have a son, or have John not die, which I honestly think they are going to kick his ass to the fridge. Sorry, John fans, if there are John fans. But by having a male child, you suddenly remove a big chunk of Michaela's initial book arc. That arc being that they took everything that was John's, his home, his clothes, his title, his land, his wealth, and yet still wants more. She wants Francesca. And so suddenly now it's only Francesca, and I think that removes a lot of that imposter syndrome style arc, especially if it's clear that Francesca never loved John. It forces the writing to go in a different direction. Maybe the struggle of feeling like she's replacing John as a parental figure in the life of his son, and running away from that. I don't know, but you have to replace it with something. And based on the way that season 3 ended up with Pollen, where they just span their wheels in place in angst for way too long, I'm not confident they have what it takes to not just make this a massive flop. I don't know if they have what it takes to replace her storyline with something that's nuanced and delicate. And on top of that, how do you do Michaela's character? Was the dude in the novel not a straight up rake with a big reputation in the ton? Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but would this not be something that's not really attainable for a woman of this era? Like, wouldn't having a reputation like that exclude her from polite society? At least when she's a single woman, because I know there's plenty of married women or widows that in real history had mega saucy reputations. They were having affairs, having lovers. There's lots of steam to be had in the Regency. But from what I understand, that is not the case if you've never been married, especially if you're not discreet about it. And a rake is not discreet, that's why they're known as a rake. And so, I don't know, to me, it means that a rewrite of a character is necessary to make sense in the patriarchal world that Bridgerton's created. Because it would feel very out of place for her to exist in that way, wouldn't it? They've gone out of their way to show how women do not have the same opportunities, how their lives can be ruined with the stroke of a pen. So having a woman like that suddenly just invalidates a lot of that story. We've seen it with Marina, with Cressida, with Penelope, with Eloise. They struggle against the patriarchy. To have someone that easily breaks free of it, I think would be a disservice to the story. Maybe, maybe not, maybe disagree. But regardless, I think they've taken a massive gamble here, and for me, it is not paying off so far. I have no doubt that it's fixable, but they've had a shaky start. All hope's not lost though. They can salvage this and make a gripping and romantic tale. I know they can. The writing just has to hold up and avoid those pitfalls that I mentioned earlier. And let's hope they can do it, right? Because regardless of what happens, I think if you're watching this video, you're probably going to watch season 4. I know I am, but I'll be shaking my bloody head if it's going to end up as I've described. It's going to be a massive fumble of what's one of their more popular stories from what I've seen. And that would be a massive shame. And so with all that being said, not much else to say. So these have been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of the Michael to Michaela situation? What side of the fence do you lean on? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.